The Carolina Hurricanes over the weekend swept the back-to-back, beating the Buffalo Sabres and the Toronto Maple Leafs. What stood out from those games? Well, we'll talk about all of that on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockeyers, also the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all my dudes here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a good Monday edition of the show, of the podcast, as we get to kind of see what stood out from the Carolina Hurricanes 6-3 win over the Buffalo Sabres on Saturday. Their comeback 5-4 win over the Toronto Maple Leafs on Sunday. And we will get to hear from Rod Brind'Amour following their win on Sunday against the Maple Leafs. But before we jump into all that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting thefanduel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And what a weekend it was for the Carolina Hurricanes, for the fact that you go into your first set of back-to-backs, you go beat the Minnesota Wild to continue a mini winning streak at that point. You won back-to-back games, beat the York Rangers on Tuesday, you beat the Wild on Thursday, and then you go into a weekend of your first back-to-back. You got Buffalo Sabres on Saturday night in Raleigh, and then you travel basically after that game and then play 24 hours later, maybe even less than that, really, when you think about it, when the game ends on Saturday and then when the game on Sunday starts, against the Toronto Maple Leafs in, I think it's the Hurricanes' first time doing the Hall of Fame game that basically introduces the class of whatever year that was on Sunday night. So, and it's, you're kind of wondering, okay, how is this team going to be? Because you're talking 3 games in 4 days. You're looking at, a team that did get, luckily, William Carrier and Eric Robinson back before Saturday's game, and you are still trying, you got Kendrick Miller back just recently as well, for that game against Minnesota. So you're kind of see some of the guys return to the lineup that you really need. So how is it going to fare for the Hurricanes? Well, unfortunately, early on in the game against the Buffalo Sabres, you're trying to come off of the fact that you lost Jalen Chatfield back on the Thursday game. So you're trying to figure, okay, defensively, how's this team going to be? Having to readjust once again to a defensive core that's now, you got Kendrick Miller back, but what are you going to do without Jalen Chatfield? And you got Nystrom, you got Legault in there, with Walker, Nikisha, Miller, and Riley. How's the defense going to fare? And I think when you look at the game, that, the Hurricanes were up 3-1 after 2 periods. Buffalo does get a couple goals back, but then the Hurricanes towards the very end, which was a very close 4-3 game, puts out of reach 6-3. And I think the big components that stood out from this game was the fact that you look at the power play. The power play stood really tall. They got 1 out of 2 chances, but it was still one that worked really well for them, for the fact that it was Andrei Svechnikov who got the power play goal. How about the fact, too, you got Jesperi Kotkaniemi scoring goal. You got Sebastian and Seth Jarvis doing what they're doing and scoring their goals. And how about a lot of firsts in this game, too? You're talking about Charles-Alexis Legault getting his first NHL point coming off the Eric Robinson goal. And then in the second period, how about Joel Nystrom gets his first NHL point on the assist for the Jesperi Kotkaniemi goal. And then after you're already up 5-3, Buffalo still has the empty net following the Seth Jarvis goal. Legault scores his first ever NHL goal as well. So you have a lot of firsts in this game, which is what you really love to see. Or the fact that you got 2 defensemen, rookie defensemen on the same team, putting up their first ever points in the same game, and for the fact that one of them also got his first NHL goal. And then after the game, you saw the team kind of mob them, during the storm surge, because that's really great to see, for the fact that you see now you have two guys being able to do that. And of course, as Kane's stat brand puts it, great follow. Rookie defenseman Joel Nyström and Charles Alexis each logged their first NHL points on Saturday, becoming the first pair of Hurricanes teammates to do so in the same game since Andrew Podorowski and Jack Drury back on December 16th, 2021. On top of that, and this was for Walt Ruff, to take this a step further, last night, talking about Saturday, was the first time in Canes history since relocation that two defensemen recorded their first career points in the same game. So that's really awesome to see, for the fact that you get, while you are getting a lot of firsts, you're getting firsts that are never been done before, and you love to see that, especially for Joel Nyström and Charles Alexis Legault, in that they go and get their first points, they go get their first goals and everything else, and it's a great moment to have for those guys to do that. I think that's kind of what you look at in this type of game, where Andrei Svechnikov has been on an absolute tear right now. Like, even going to the Toronto Maple Leafs game, which we'll talk about in segment 2, the fact that he's still doing what he can for the Carolina Hurricanes in terms of point streaks and stuff like that. But this shows you the next up mentality for the Carolina Hurricanes, especially on the defensive side of things, where you, for whatever reason, you lose a defenseman almost every single game, it seems like, or very much close to it. Like, you get Miller back, but you lose Chatfield. You get Shane Gostisbehere back, but then he's gone. You're going down to your 8th, 9th, 10th defenseman. And Gavin Bayreuther, who was recently called up for the Carolina Hurricanes as well, from Chicago. So in reality, and this was even before what happens to Legault on Sunday against Toronto, which we'll talk about, now you're looking at your 12th defenseman on your depth chart. That's what the Hurricanes had to do. They've had to go next up man mentality a lot. And it's good to see that those guys like Nyström and Legault get rewarded for their hard work, because they've done really well so far this season. We all thought they were going to be starting in Chicago, and they've been playing a lot of games for the Hurricanes because they need them. Because of the fact that you're still out without Slavin, you're still without Gostisbehere. You finally just got Miller back, but then you just lost Chatfield, and you're having to. And Mike Riley is doing a lot of great things on the defense, and he was supposed to be the 7th defenseman, but now he's he's double digits in plus for the Hurricanes. Like, he's top 2 along with Alexander Nikishin. I think when you look at this Buffalo Sabres game, that's the one where this is a team that, they were up. Buffalo gets within 1 goal, but then they find a way to close it out. It's that pulling on the same rope. It's that mentality of, there are certain expectations that they have to keep pushing, because this is a team that, you're dealing with some adversity, but you got to keep winning. You still got to keep being a competitive hockey team regardless of the injuries. And I think while you look at most recent teams, like you're talking the 21-22 or 22-23 teams, where there's a lot of deep teams recently, but when you look at this Hurricanes roster that's depleted on their blue line, there's a different mentality with this hockey team, where you got the the rope, everyone's pulling on the same rope, but there's this accountability. There's this, you are going to pull in the same direction. You're going to try to keep getting to the expectations that this team has to achieve. And I think the Hurricanes feel this, and I think the guys are feeling this too, where there is no excuses. There is that it's the next man up, and you're going to keep playing, and you're going to have to just deal with what, the injury bug that the Hurricanes are going on right now. I think this is a Buffalo game where, the Sabres are struggling. Is this a measuring stick game compared to the other ones you've had to play? Probably not, but it's still a Buffalo team. It still has guys who can score goals, and it shows the adversity of the fact that no game is going to be perfect, but as long as you still keep doing what you need to do and keep doing your job, you're going to score, and you get rewarded for it. Like I said, you got Aho with a goal, Seth Jarvis with a goal, KK scoring, Seth scoring on the power play. You got Legault and Nystrom getting their first points, and now you come out with a 6-3 win. You're on a 3-game winning streak, and now you won the first half of a back-to-back with Peter Kochetkov in net, and now you go into Toronto being, okay, that's one down. Toronto also played on Saturday, but, they lost to Boston. How is Sunday going to be between these two teams? Well, we'll stick around and we'll talk about what kind of stood out in the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs here in a second on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posting on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs. Put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Everyone's been in that spot where you need to right there hire someone basically yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs comes in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with the $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNHL right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Well, Indeed is all you need. Welcome back to Section 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day and your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Now, we talked about the Buffalo Sabres game, but now let's talk about the game on Sunday against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And first of all, it's great to see that this is the first time the Hurricanes get to do the Hall of Fame game against the Maple Leafs, and they introduced the class of whatever year that was. It was the 2025 class that had, Chara and Duncan Keith and Alexander McGill, even though he wasn't there, and Jumbo Joe and all that. So the bad thing is currently that Rod Brind'Amour should have been part of that Hall of Fame class, but, we've been there and done that. You've heard me talk about it all the time. It is what it is. Ever since the David Ehlers Zamboni driver game, and if everyone knows, if you've seen the Steve Dangle episode about that, you'll know what I'm talking about. If not, go to the Steve Dangle podcast on YouTube and watch his reaction to them losing a 42-year-old Zamboni driver who worked for the team. Ever since then, every game between the Hurricanes and the Maple Leafs have never been normal, to say the least. And this was another one where it made no sense, but somehow it just got there. So you have a first period, 5 goals, and it's William Nylander scoring twice in the same period, which is, of course, William Nylander. You get John Tavares in his 1,200th game scoring a goal, which is John Tavares doing his thing. He is now, I think, at 32 goals against the Carolina Hurricanes in his career, which is crazy to think about. But the good thing is the power play scores in back-to-back games. You got Sebastian Aho scoring there. You got Seth Jarvis being inevitable as always, scoring his 10th goal of the season. Second period, Austin Matthews scores, but then you got Sean Walker, who scored 3 goals in his last 4 games. I would say don't let Sean Walker get hot, but yes, let Sean Walker get hot. My goodness, this guy is absolutely unreal. And talk about Seth Jarvis real quick. How about for the fact that he is the second fastest player in 15 years to score 10 goals in a season? The only guy who scored faster than him, Andrei Svechnikov, who did it in 14 games back in the 22-23 season. On top of that, Seth Jarvis is the only player that in this season has scored at least 10 goals and have tallied on the power play, shorthand, and in overtime. Big thank you to Ryan Henkel. Previous thing was from Walt Ruff, and then one quick from Kane Stats. This was after the Buffalo game. 78-5-6 in regular season games where the Hurricanes have won, things to start Seth Jarvis scoring a goal. After the Toronto game, make that 79-5-6 with Seth Jarvis scoring goal in the regular season for the Carolina Hurricanes. As I say, Seth Jarvis is inevitable. Now, after the Sean Walker goal, it's 4-3 Hurricanes after Austin Matthews makes it 4-2. From hockeypuck.com, there's this winometer stat that they always show of like over a certain number of simulations, this is a team that should have won the percentage amount of all of these games. At the time, it was 4-2 for the Toronto Maple Leafs. The winometer showed the Hurricanes winning over 90% of those games out of 500 simulations. The Maple Leafs, 6.6%. And would have been better if it was 6.7% just for the 1967 memes, which would have been absolutely fantastic. But in 500 simulations, the Leafs only would have won 6.6% of those games. And this was when they're up 4-2 against the Hurricanes. And I've heard some people say this is a game where the Maple Leafs should have never won. This is a game that somehow they're leading in the game they should have never won. I say this because if you look at the shot totals between both of these teams, 12-10 after one. Okay, 12-10 after one. That makes sense. Totally fair. Hurricanes were out in Toronto. 13-8 in the second. Okay, it's 25-18. Still reasonable within striking distance of each other in terms of shots on goal. Maple Leafs are winning 4-3 after two. Maybe the Hurricanes have been playing better, but shot discrepancy isn't that bad. The third period alone, where the Hurricanes scored 2 goals, one from Taylor Hall and from Logan Stankoven, 22-2 in shots in favor of the Hurricanes. You heard that right. The Maple Leafs, after going up 4-2 at one point, it's 4-3 after 2. The Leafs have 2 shots the entire third period. The Hurricanes had 22. That is such a huge number discrepancy between the two teams. 47-20 in shot totals between both sides. Super close most of the first 2 periods, and then all of a sudden 22-2 in the third, and the Hurricanes win. And you're talking about, like I said, Sebastian Aho in the power play back-to-back games. Seth Jarvis, 10 goals. He's on an absolute tear right now. You get a multi-point night from Logan Stankoven because he got the assist on the Taylor Hall goal and scored his own goal, which was the game winner. You're talking about multi-point games from Nikolaj, Ehlers, and Keandre Miller. Ehlers had the primary, Miller had the secondary on the Aho goal to make it 1-1. And then later on in the game, Miller gets the primary, Ehlers gets the secondary assist. And the thing, too, is Ehlers and Aho are on a 4-game point streak after the Toronto game. It was a multi-point night for a lot of these guys. And for the fact, too, you get the power play, it's kind of heating up right now. Yes, you're going 1 for 3 or 1 for 2, but hey, you're still scoring on the power play. Now, are you still bottom 5 in the league? Yes, unfortunately, but the power play is somewhat heating up and you love to see it. But you're getting your star scoring. You've got, like I said, Aho scoring. Jarvis is scoring. Sean Walker scored 3 goals in 4 games now. He's on an absolute run, and he's been stepping up big for the defense. Then you're looking, like I said, Stankoven the multi-point game. Ehlers, after a slow start, he's been on an absolute tear. Keandre Miller comes back, multi-points. He's getting points in his games, too. He had a multi-point game against Toronto, and he had one against Buffalo, so he's been on a run recently as well. So you're getting contributions from everyone across the board, and we're not even talking about the fact that Jackson Blake recently had a huge goal back against Minnesota, which was absolutely wild, no pun intended. Or pun intended, however you want to look at it. But this Hurricanes team is finding ways to keep winning. And the fact that they beat Toronto 5-4 in a comeback win on Hall of Fame night in a game where on paper the Leafs should never have won that game, but the Hurricanes found a way to get it done. They are now 11-4 on the season. They're on a 4-game winning streak, and you just swept a back-to-back against Buffalo and Toronto. So there's 4 Eastern Conference points out of 4 on the weekend. Now you get to play the Capitals on Tuesday before you have another back-to-back later this week. So the Hurricanes are finding ways to get the job done, and the fact they did this on 5 defensemen for the last 2 periods, because unfortunately during after the whistle scrum when the first period ended, Charles Alexis Legault unfortunately got his hand got cut on Nick Robertson's skate as he got tangled up. I think it was Brian with McCabe, and his hand went down and caught the skate of Robertson because his foot was sticking up and his skate blade was up. So his hand got cut, and unfortunately, they go to the hospital, but to get looked at. He did travel back with the team, but now they're evaluating on this Monday whenever you listen to the podcast. So hopefully we'll get an update on that, which it's terrible because he's been playing really well. And, now they call him Gavin Bayreuther just in case, and they might have to go to him. And we'll have to see how that plays out for the defense. It's another defenseman out, but the Hurricanes won another game on having 5 defensemen in the lineup, but they're getting contributions from everyone, and you love to see it on that aspect. There's just more next man up, but hopefully it's not terrible to go. Hopefully he's out for a long time because he has been playing well for the Carolina Hurricanes, but it's just whatever voodoo, like whoever cursed this defense, get it off, because this is absolutely insane how many defensemen we have to keep going through, and no one. It's just crazy how many guys the Hurricanes have to go through already. Like barely missed anyone last year, and now you're talking 15 games into the season, and they're down to like they're going to their 12th defenseman on the depth chart already. This is some scary times indeed for sure. But hopefully it's not terrible for the go. But it's, the fact that the Hurricanes are still winning games, man. Like I said, you're talking 4 in a row. You're 11-4 in the year, and despite all of these injuries, you're still getting the job done. There's a different mentality with this Carolina Hurricanes. So what did Rod Brind'Amour say after the game on Sunday? Well, stick around. We'll talk about it here in a second on a Monday edition of the Locked On Hurricanes. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth-quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push, whether it's your actual NBA team or your fantasy team. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So we kind of talked about stuff that stood out from the Sabres game and the Toronto game over the weekend, but what did Rod Brind'Amour say after the Hurricanes win against Toronto on Sunday? Well, we'll listen to that right now and react to it right here in a second.
What was the biggest reason and ability to do so?
It's a good question. I mean, I think we knew we were playing pretty well. We just, we were getting opportunities. I think the second period we had a few breakaways off the post. Like, it was right there. And then we did have a couple mistakes, where we left their better players alone, which can't do. And then they were little tap-ins. But aside from that, I thought, we played a really solid game.
Obviously a really concerning moment with Charles Alexis Legault. What update can you provide on him?
Yeah, he went to the hospital. I think he's coming back with us. So that part's good. I know it's not a good injury, though, from what I'm hearing. So I don't want to say too much. I don't know. That's tough to see, though.
Was it a skate cut?
I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, it was just bleeding profusely, and that doesn't look good. And then when they have to take him away to the hospital, that's not good. But apparently he's going to be coming back with us and have to get looked at tomorrow.
Every team has to deal with injuries, but I mean, now the guys who are replacing guys are going down too. And
I've never seen anything like it, to be honest. In all my days, I mean, you get injuries, a couple here or there, but to this degree, it's just been the way it's gone. So, but it's impressive for me. It's just how we found ways to get it done. And tonight was kind of everybody, right? Like, that's the way it has to be. And that's how we're built, really, too. So, that came kind of to the fruition tonight, right? That's what you saw.
Power play gets one for a second.
Yeah, they were good. Tonight. I mean, we had a couple of really good looks, and even on the 4-on-3 there, but a couple posts too on the one. I mean, it's it's been tough sledding, but I think it's kind of looked like that here lately. I like that part of it, and we were able to get one, which is good.
Rod, I know it's difficult for a guy like Seth Jarvis, who's playing for one team this year and obviously auditioning for another one throughout the season. How do you think he's handled that, and how do you think he's doing this
Well,
year?
he's. I mean, I'm biased, obviously, so I'm probably not the right guy to ask, but it's pretty obvious that I'd have him on a team like that. I mean, because he can do whatever you want.
Right.
Like, that's the key. Like, you can obviously pick the best players for Team Canada. That might not be the best team. Mm-hmm. And you need guys that know how to do other things, and he covers everything. So, and I still think he has to be one of the best Canadian players out there. Just very special player.
Rod, productive week for Nikolaj Ehlers. How do you describe his transition
really,
as a whole?
I thought he was solid tonight, and I think, we got a goal, a few games ago, and it just feels like you can just see all of a sudden there's like a little more, I don't know, pep in his step or whatever, and a little more comfortable. It's a lot of pressure when you come to a new team and all the hype, and then more so when you've been somewhere for a long time. It's just everything feels different, and I think he's starting to feel at home now, and he certainly looked great tonight.
Which parts of his skill set did you really think would be a fit, like back to the summer when you talked to him and Eric talked to him?
Yeah, well, speed, and then it's hard to kind of talk about it, but it's kind of that poise, offensive poise. Like, you watch him when he gets the puck, there's that little extra, he has the ability to create something out of nothing. And that's kind of what we need a little more of, and I think that clearly what he can bring.
Yeah, that one-man zone entry element,
right.
Like, not a lot of teams have that, right?
There you go. Well, I mean, some teams have it in spades, but like we that's one of the areas that we definitely need an improvement, and he's one of those guys.
Big thank you to the Carolina Hurricanes and Rod Brind'Amour for the audio on that, so we can kind of listen to it and react to it. And you heard from him when talking about Legault, he didn't know what was going on. It's just a bad situation if he had to leave the game like that, holding his hand and having to go to the hospital. Of course, he didn't want to speculate on everything else about that, but hopefully it's not terrible. Wishing, Charles Alexis, hopefully the best, and hopefully it's not the worst case scenario. Hopefully he's not out for a long time, because he's been playing really well for the Hurricanes. But then, they talk about, just that everyone had to contribute against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like I said, you got Sean Walker staying hot with his goal scoring. You got the second line of Ehlers and Stankoven and Blake all contributing in some way. You got multi-point nights, like I said, from Stankoven, Ehlers, and Miller. Sebastian Aho is scoring. Seth Jarvis is scoring. All of that too, and everyone's kind of pulling their weight. And to talk about Seth Jarvis, they asked Rod Brind'Amour about making the Canadian Olympic team. And I love the fact he's like, well, I am biased, and maybe the wrong guy to ask, but he does break down the fact that you look at what Seth Jarvis does. And I think it almost reminds me of, the 1980 men's Olympic team for the United States, where they talk about how you can always try to get the best players, but if they don't know how to work together, is it really a team that's going to gel and work well? Because you look at what, the NHL All-Stars got beaten at the time by the Soviet Union because they had all their best players, but they didn't know how to play as a team. Where you look at the gold medal team in 80, bunch of college kids, a bunch of amateurs, and they played really well together. So I think when if you draw the comparison to the Canadian team and with Seth Jarvis does all the right things that you need to ask him. He was on the Four Nations team for a reason, as one of the 23 best Canadians to be on that roster. And the start he's having, you're talking 10 goals in 15 games and, a shorthanded goal, 4 game winners, a few overtime goals, power play. Like, he's doing everything you're asking of him. Like, there's rumblings of Selke talk for this guy. I know you're going to look at Jordan Staal and what he does, and nothing to take away from Jordo, but Seth Jarvis is on another level right now to where he should be looked at as a Selke guy. So I think it makes sense where you look at what Rod Brind'Amour is saying. Yeah, you can accumulate all the best talent, but is that the best team outside of working together? If they can work together, then fine. But if they're all the best players, but they don't know how to work together, is that a really great hockey team? I think you need to have guys like a Seth Jarvis who you can put him in all situations and he will do the things that you need to ask him. So when you look at what Seth Jarvis has done, yeah, I think he should be part of the Canadian team. And Rod Brind'Amour I think Rod Brind'Amour knows what he's talking about the most. We're going to talk about his guys and someone like Seth Jarvis, who's been on this upper trajectory of his career, and he just keeps getting better. as we go along. The fact that you're talking about the guy who's the second fastest Hurricanes player to score 10 goals in a season in 15, only behind Andrei Svechnikov, and he's got 4 game winners and 2 overtime winners and everything else on top of that, power play, shorthands, all of that. That is a guy you want to have on your roster. So it's good to hear from the head coach himself saying, like, I am biased, but I also going to be realistic and saying that, yeah, he is a guy that, would fit really well in the Canadian roster for what he does as an impactful player on a 200-foot two-way game. So you love to hear it, and hopefully Seth Jarvis gets more opportunities. And right now he's been playing well. Aho is on, like I said, he's on a 4-game point streak. So is Nikolaj Ehlers. Everyone is just playing really great hockey right now with all the injuries that they're dealing with, and now it's just another next man up mentality. Luckily, they get Monday off before they play against the Capitals on Tuesday, and we'll see what happens from there. So it should be very interesting to see how it works out. And one quick note as well, some good news. Caden Primo's back with the Carolina Hurricanes. The Maple Leafs put him on waivers, and there's only 4 teams behind the Hurricanes in terms of waiver claims. They're the only one to pick him up. So per the CBA rules, he can be automatically sent to Chicago without being put through waivers, because his original team that lost him in waivers got him back, and they were the only ones that put the claim in. So Caden Primo's back with the Hurricanes, and he's on his way to Chicago, and you love to see it. Now you got Kochetkov, Anderson, Bussy, and Primo as your 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're going to see what Ruslan Kasayev has done for the Wolves. You get 5 really solid goaltenders right off the rip for the Hurricanes. And goalie depth just got so much better for the Carolina Hurricanes. But we'll see how it goes from there. But Brandon Bussy did get the win on Sunday. Cannot overlook that shaky start from. But, the team picked him up after he's picked them up for most of the season. But he did get the win. And you love to see it. Another win for him. And now you keep rolling on with a great depth at goaltending at least. And now you're looking at, everyone who's just kind of pushing their way through and just keep rolling along, as now it's 4 straight wins for the Hurricanes. They are 11-4, and now we have another week of Carolina Hurricanes hockey to look forward to. Should be a lot of fun, and hopefully not as nerve-wracking, with hopefully less injuries on the docket. But guys, this will be the Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen. For your second listen, go check out the Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube, or if you listen to your podcast. If you want to keep up with me, I'm a One True Zach on X. The podcast is _Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky at the Zachary Martin. If you click the link tree in my bios, you can find all of my written content at the Hockey Writers. So make sure you check that out. I've got a lot of stuff coming out, and got a lot more coming along the way as well. If you want to check out my other podcasts, it's the Search Cast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure you leave a 5-star rating and review, because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up, tell me if you like the show as well. Share with other Canadians to become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Monday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.